Welcome to another Monday. This is October 24th, 2022. The chart that caught my attention this past week was the chart of Liz Truss, who had the dubious distinction of being the shortest serving prime minister on record for the UK. And so she took office on September 6th, and she resigned 45 days later on October 20th. And so let's take a look at her chart, which is the inner wheel, and then the outer wheel is the chart of the day that she took office as prime minister on September 6th. You see that there are several things in her chart. While she's got a Leo sun, it's not really as woven into her chart as some of the other aspects. So let's take a look at them. We see first off the bat that she's got this Mars in Taurus. And this is a point that is emphasized right now because the North Node and Uranus have been at this point. In fact, last summer when she was vying to be prime minister, she was having a Mars return, and they all met up together just 1 degree past her Mars. And so that is one point that we're looking at in her chart, and especially when we notice that Saturn is not that far away from squaring that Mars as well. And so there are some challenges to that Mars. But then also a very distinctive aspect in her chart. And again, we're just looking at a noon chart. We can't look at houses or at our angles, but we can get lots of information from the planets themselves. And so we see that she's got a Saturn-Mercury conjunction in Cancer. And so that's a very intelligent, very driven, very studious, very focused aspect. But also Saturn in Cancer is a little problematic. It's in its detriment, maybe not as good at connecting emotionally with others. And we see that on the day she was born, Uranus in Libra and Jupiter in Aries were creating in her chart a T-square with that Mercury-Saturn conjunction. So this is someone who's able to harness a lot of energy. You think about this Jupiter and Aries ambition, very expansive ambition, wanting to lead, wanting to be first. This Uranus in Libra wanting to fight for justice and what she believed to be would be a fair world for everybody. And so all of this energy is poured into the apex of her T-square, which is that Mercury-Saturn conjunction. So she applies herself. She's studious. She's diligent. She, campaigns. She works very hard when she's in office so that she can rise up through the ranks. And so this is cooking away in her chart, but she's got another T-square that's working in her chart as well. Notice she's got Venus here in Virgo, and she's known as a fiscally conservative person, very interested in finance and economics. But it's in opposition to her moon in Pisces. And so she would have a great compassion and fellow feeling for people. And so you can see how she'd be pulled back and forth between those two impulses. Do I provide this social safety net for others, or do I support business? And we notice, though, that this opposition also forms a T-square. We've got the opposition, but we see here Neptune squares both the moon and Venus. And you think of that Neptune and Sagittarius as creating an ideal system. Laws and rules and regulation that would bring about this balance that she's seeking between compassion for others and kind of support of the business or the economy that provides jobs and brings economic progress to the UK. So she's got that T-square working in her chart as well. And so what's interesting is that on the day that she became prime minister, we can look first at what is happening to this Moon, Neptune, Venus square, T square. And you see, oh, right up here, Mars is exactly square her Venus now, and her moon. Now, remember, her moon could be anywhere from 2 to 14 degrees of Pisces and opposing that Neptune. So here's Mars. She gets very busy right away, wanting to create this new system that she's so excited about. However, what she's doing is creating a grand cross with that Mars. And so she's got all of her ideas. You think of air and new ideas and, you know, the energy of Gemini, but yet they're kind of coming up against this Neptunian fog. Like the ideas she's putting into place aren't quite working out the way that she planned. You know, her willingness to, you know, help others and her desire to support business become very muddled and confused. And so she ends up angering the people who she's most trying to help. A grand cross is very fixed. You know, you think about the person who's caught up in a grand cross is really being pulled in all different directions. You know, she's got her ideals, she's got her energy, the new things that she wants to bring about. She's got the business interest, she's got the compassionate interest. How do you serve them all? So that's one of the aspects going on in the chart. But let's look also at what is happening with her other T square with the Mercury Saturn conjunction in Cancer. And if we look down here, we see that the moon and Capricorn, I'm sorry, the moon and Capricorn and Pluto are together on the day that she took office as prime minister. And so this is completing another T square to create a grand cross. You know, it's opposing her Saturn, Mercury, and it's squaring her Jupiter, Uranus. And so one thing strangely ironic about Liz Truss taking office is that she was the last public duty that Queen Elizabeth had before she passed away. She died 2 days later. And so Liz Truss was was the last prime minister to meet with Queen Elizabeth, so very Plutonian, but also the first prime minister to meet with a new King Charles, so rebirth. And so she was present at this very dramatic moment in history. And you can see how that would have, you know, she's at this point where she wants to build something and establish something. You know, she's got her ambition and her goals and her desire to lead. And she's just kind of hung down here in this, you know, very Plutonian world where she is trying to meet her obligations as prime minister and yet get her new administration going at the same time. So again, we see her kind of fixed in place with the Grand Cross, that she's wanting to create something. She's wanting to, you know, step into this leadership role she's been preparing for her whole life, wanting to bring in radical change, wanting to serve her ambition, but yet she's kind of mired here in a very traditional system that's not that willing to consider change very quickly. But then finally, what's happening with this Mars? We see that at the time she's taking office, you know, she's got the North Node going over it, Uranus there. So that's empowering her, giving her a sense that, oh, finally I'm here. I can take the reins. But what is it doing but creating a square with Saturn? And we'll find as she goes through her 45 days in office, Saturn is moving retrograde and will come back to square that Mars. And also, she is very much caught up in what we all are and have been for the past 2 years, which is the Saturn-Uranus square. That Uranus, where we want to break free and revolutionize something in our life, and Saturn, where we're kind of caught, where we're held responsible. And so in her case, she's got this Mars that really wants to build something, Mars in Taurus. She's, thinks I can radicalize, I can change this system. But over here in square is this Saturn, which is the system that has been going on for centuries in England. The different types of the factions of people that you have to please in order to hold political power, very much holding her down and repressing her as she's attempting to implement her new ideas. And so finally, though, let's take a look at the day of her resignation. Because even though I think I'm sure she was not particularly happy to be losing, her term in office, especially after not really even giving a chance to see if something could work. We see here how, the Saturn has come back to square her Mars. And we see also one thing that's kind of interesting is that she became prime minister as the moon was growing in light. It was between new and full. At this point, the moon is waning. It's almost at the in fact, it's past the 3/4 phase. And so this moon, at the same time that it's a waning moon, it's also at a kind of a fateful point to her nodal axis. You can see that it's in square to her nodal axis. And people who become very powerful with groups of people oftentimes have connections to this nodal axis because it means just a mass of people. The moon, can be the populace, and when you have the nodes of the moon, those are very sensitive points when it comes to building popular appeal. And you can see at this point that the moon has moved from the south node into that bending of the nodes. And that's almost like a bucket's been dumped over and all the water has drained out by the time it reaches that south bending of the nodes. And so that's another signature of a loss that she experienced personally. However, a couple of things in her chart made me think, I wonder if in a way she was maybe a little relieved. We see Jupiter has been moving in trine to her sun. And so, that Leo sun hadn't been much in play in all of these other very heavy aspects going on in her chart. And so I'm wondering if Jupiter there is kind of giving her a sense of relief. And especially when you look at how Mars has moved forward in Gemini and is creating, a sextile to her own Jupiter and a trine to her Uranus. So I kind of looked at that and thought, I wonder if she just got home and made a cup of tea and put up her feet and said, thank heavens I don't have to deal with that mess anymore. That's just speculation on my part. But I hope for her sake that she is having a chance to get a breather and make plans for what she's going to do next, because she's obviously a very talented and gifted politician, and certainly should be someone that we hear about from in the future. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this interesting chart, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.